Welcome to the next episode of Your Charisma Coach. It's finally here. I've hidden myself around the back of a brick wall to tell you about the hidden game that's being played around you. You see, you can have a great conversation with somebody, or what seems great, and never meet that person again. Because it's not about the words you're saying, it's also about your ability to read the unconscious signals that that person's giving off, and also what's going on in the room around you. Now, you've probably never been taught how to do this because no one is. We're just, it's luck if we pick it up. But what this video is going to show you how to do is spot those unconscious cues. Because when you know how to read body language signals, and when you can see the narrative of the room, of the context of the environment, and of the people that you're talking to, you'll have an unfair advantage over everyone else in that environment. So in a moment, I'm going to share with you 60 seconds of in-field footage where our co-founder, Johnny Dupre, walks into a room and starts a conversation with complete strangers. And I'm going to break down and show you what myself as a charisma coach and our trainers are always looking out for when we're in conversations that lead to fantastic connections with others. So if you're having conversations with people and they're not going anywhere, by the end of this video, you'll know why that's happening, and you'll also be able to look out for these cues yourself. Right, let's get to it. Here's the footage. So this is a typical environment that you can start a conversation in. It's a coffee shop. There's about 6 people in that room that you can talk to. But where on earth do you begin? You walk in, everyone's doing something. It's kind of a bit of a nightmare to start from scratch. Now, Johnny's walked in and he's just paused. The reason he's paused is to see if he can get anybody's attention with his eye contact alone. And you'll notice that the guy in the background actually clocks him and they look at each other just for a split second. That's going to be important in a moment.
Love this place.
You don't have to have Johnny's energy or Johnny's style, but he just says, I love this place. And somebody just acknowledges that again. But also, if you were like me and you're watching this, you think, yeah, but where on earth do you go with that? Because you say something, all eyes suddenly get on you, and then the inevitable happens. 9 times out of 10, it becomes really awkward. You're like, oh, I wish I hadn't said anything. Now I look like a weirdo. So this is what's really important. It's what comes next.
Every time you come into Starbucks, it always has that same smell, no matter where you go in the world.
So now what Johnny does is he adds some context to his initial statement. That allows everyone to understand why he's sharing that observation, which is, hey, all Starbucks smell the same. Now, that may or may not be true, but what is true is that 50% of the room has noticed him. The lady in the white in the foreground has started laughing. The lady on the laptop is looking up and she's smiling. And the guy in the blue shirt is walking towards him. And notice, as he walks towards Johnny, he also looks at the other two for confirmation that, this humor is shared. So what's happened is you've got several groups of people who are all individual are now coming together. You've got 4 people sharing in a joke with Johnny. That's 5. That's almost a mini group in that room, where before they were all doing their own thing and focused on whatever they're doing at that time. So let's get to the next bit.
You know what I mean?
Now this is just a fraction of a second, but some really important stuff's happened. You'll notice that Johnny's continued eye contact with the most receptive people, which was the lady who was sitting down in white. And the reason she was the most receptive is because she verbally acknowledged what he said. She laughed. And because of that, it's just natural to pay more attention to that person. He also acknowledged the other lady who was sitting at the table. Now, the guy who's in the blue shirt who walks up on the right, he didn't get acknowledged the second time. So he's already committed himself to joining a conversation, and indeed, he would be very receptive to talk to you right now because he's experienced an emotion. But because he doesn't see the confirmation from Johnny, he pulls out his phone and focuses on that instead. So a very good rule of thumb is if you ever create emotion in somebody, even somebody to the left of you or the right of you, you can bring them into a conversation. Once you've triggered an emotion in somebody, they're very receptive to further conversation. And this is something a lot of people miss out on.
Walk into London, you can walk into Paris, and there's always that Starbucks smell. You know what I'm talking about, ladies?
So Johnny's enjoying the conversation. He's sharing it because he's not trying to create an impression here. He's just expressing himself. And he naturally walks towards that person, or those people at the table, to continue that conversation. Now, at the moment, there's 3 people included. What will happen, though, is depending on where he focuses eye contact, will determine where that conversation ignites. He could turn to the lady at the laptop, but it seems he's focusing on the couple who are sitting in the foreground, just because they've been the most receptive so far.
You know what I'm saying? Feels like home, even if you're far away.
So did you notice how Johnny just turned and directed his attention to the lady at the laptop, just to see if he could bring it into the conversation. You'll notice her response wasn't as receptive as the two sitting in the foreground, so it's just natural he's going to focus on those two more, and it's completely alright to do that. You don't have to win over the entire room in one go. You'll notice the girl in the back in grey still hasn't responded to the conversation at all. Now, it might be because she's not interested in the topic of conversation, she might not be focused and present, she might be thinking about what coffee she wants, she might not even speak English. There could be dozens and dozens of reasons. The main thing is, it doesn't mean that Johnny won't speak to her later on, it just means that he's focused on this conversation for now. And when you're in social environments, you don't have to talk to everyone all at once. Sometimes you can move around the room, but it's great to establish that first anchor point, which he's already done. And we know that because he shared emotion. He shared emotion with the person in blue, he shared emotion with the lady at the laptop, even though it was just a smile. It was still better than no response at all. And he shared an actual laugh from the couple who was sitting in the foreground as well. Let's see what happens next. So after sharing that spirited moment, Johnny leaves to actually go and order a coffee. The reason he comes back into the conversation is not because he's trying some trick to leave and then come back, to pretend to go. It's actually because the lady in the foreground starts talking to him. And so naturally he's going to come back into that conversation. And that's great. If you ever, you're walking through a room and you say hi to somebody and they say hi back, that's a reason to then cut off what you're doing and then go and talk to that person. And that works pretty much anywhere. Whenever you see somebody who's making an effort to contribute, to respond to what you're saying, you can allow that to be the reason you actually come back into the conversation. You don't have to kind of say, hi, I can only stay for 5 minutes, but I've got to go. You can just say hi, have a bit of a chat, go to leave, somebody starts talking to you, come back. That's much more natural, and that's what's happened here.
Seriously? You're like, listen, I've not had...
So just a quick observation, notice how when he comes back to that environment where the couple are sitting, he puts his hands on the furniture. This locks him into the conversation. It's a really good old thing to do. So when you're talking to somebody, you're not just floating around, sort of hanging around, like waiting for the conversation to end so you can go. Just put your hand on a table or a chair that's nearby, and it kind of just locks you in and shows the other person that, hey, I'm happy to talk to you. And if the conversation starts to fade, or you feel you want to leave, you can just take your hand off that bit of furniture as well. If there's no furniture, you can just lean. All right, so you're showing enthusiasm for the conversation before it's even unfolded, and that actually encourages that other person to speak a bit more as well. So let's see what happens now.
My caffeine intake for the day, I'm turning into someone who's very upset.
Okay, did you notice that the lady in the background on the laptop is laughing? She's still responding to Johnny's presence there. Now, because of that, he could turn and include her into the conversation and bring her in, right? And he might do that by just, turning over and say, do you agree? Just to get some more input from her, because at the moment she's taking a very passive role where she's just smiling and she's listening. And by the way, that's fine. What I want to do is just draw your attention to this. So what's also interesting is you're seeing the lady in white nodding and laughing. This is great. This is more signals that person's giving off that they're like, I really enjoy this conversation. We haven't seen the responses of the girl in the foreground either, but we can assume because her friend is laughing that she's also going to be enjoying that conversation.
How you guys doing? Good day?
Yeah.
You guys, are you guys from San Diego, locals, or are you guys visiting?
Local, I'm not.
Okay, where are you from?
Walnut Creek.
Now, Johnny's asking really normal, generic questions, and there's nothing wrong with that. He's already shared emotions with everyone at this table already, so now's a great time to actually ask those questions. Hi, how are you? Where are you from? The big mistake people make is they ask those questions too early on in a conversation. How do you know it's too early? Well, unless you've shared some sort of emotional connection with somebody, in other words, they felt a good positive emotion in your presence, it's too early to ask those sorts of questions. Otherwise you end up in really boring small talk. So if you found yourself trying to start a conversation with somebody going, hi, yeah, nice weather, where are you from? And it's weird, it's because you've not created any sense of emotion in them. Because he has, it's quite all right to ask those questions. And in fact, sharing those sorts of questions and the answers with one another leads to a sense of connection.
Walnut Creek, okay. What brings you down? Well,
My daughter.
obviously. No, complete strangers, right? Complete strangers you just met right now.
Now, there's a fair chance your energy isn't the same as Johnny's. I know from experience, Johnny is super high energy. But what he's done here is very elegant. He's repeated the answer that the person gave back to his question. And that shows he's listening. Because what you want to do in a conversation is once you've got to that part where you've experienced emotions and now you're trading questions, is you want to take your foot off the gas. In other words, you want to let the emotional energy of the conversation of what you're expressing just come down a little. What that does is it encourages the other person to start expressing themselves. In other words, they start investing in the conversation and they value the conversation more. So if you ever find yourself as the person who's doing all the talking, it's probably because you're not taking your foot off the gas and you're not allowing that other person to express themselves. So a great way that Johnny's demonstrated this here is just initially just to repeat back what somebody said. And then as you do that, just allow the tone, your emotional tone of the energy, just to come down an octave, a little bit at a time. Let's see what happens next.
Question. What is this?
Okay, so we've just broken down 60 seconds of talking to people in a room, and you can see there's lots of social dynamics at play. Now, I have a confession. The truth is, I could spend 3 hours breaking down all the dynamics in that 1 minute video. There is so much going on. I want you then to look for those patterns that are playing out around you, because when you start to notice them, then you start to understand them. And the more you look for, the more you'll find. So when you're having conversations, see if you can notice other people responding to you. Does somebody look up at you as you start talking to a group of people? Do you say hi to somebody and somebody nearby smiles? This is all happening all the time. You've just got to start looking out for it. So hopefully this video is going to give you a lot of those clues for what is going on around you. If you'd like some more help and some more training with that, I'm going to tell you how you can do that at the end of this video, which will probably be in the next 10 seconds. So for the meantime, thanks so much for checking out what we do. We love being your charisma coach, and we'll see you on the next episode. That's all for now. Hey, this might be useful. If you head over to yourcharismacoach.com, you'll be able to download a copy of our book for free. It's packed full of tips and techniques that enable you to impress anyone with your amazing conversation skills. So if you've ever struggled to be effortlessly charismatic when you really needed it, this book is going to help you out loads. Head over to yourcharismacoach.com, enter your email address, and we'll give you the link to get the book. See you there.